The Alaska meeting changed everything, not just for America and Russia, but for the entire world. What looked like a simple diplomatic talk turned into something much bigger, something that made every major power rethink their position on the global stage. Here's what most people missed. While Trump and Putin were shaking hands in that cold room, India was quietly becoming the real winner. Not because they were at the table, but because they stayed away from it. And that choice, that single strategic move, just shifted the balance of world power in ways nobody saw coming. Think about this for a moment. Two superpowers meet. One walks away empty-handed, the other gets everything without giving anything back. And somehow a third country that wasn't even there ends up stronger than both. How does that happen? And why should you care about what this means for the future? The answers will change how you see global politics forever. Let me paint you a picture. Trump walks into Alaska with big promises. He tells the world he won't accept anything less than progress. He wants Russia to stop the war in Ukraine. He wants concessions. He even threatens serious consequences if Putin says no. Bold words, right? The kind of tough talk that usually works in business deals. But here's the thing about Putin. He doesn't do business the way Trump expects. He comes to the table with his own demands. Ukraine must give up Donetsk and Luhansk, hand over territory that thousands died defending. In return, Putin offers one thing. He'll stop pushing forward. Not peace, not compromise, just a freeze. Now watch what happens next. Trump, the master negotiator, sits across from Putin. 2 hours later, they walk out. Putin got nothing he didn't already have. Trump got nothing he asked for. But somehow, Trump calls the meeting extremely productive. That's the moment everything changed. Russian media celebrated like they'd won a war. Commentators said Putin gave Trump nothing but walked away with everything he wanted. And they were right. Russia kept all its territorial gains, faced no new sanctions, and proved to the world that America couldn't force their hand. Meanwhile, Trump looked impressed. His body language said it all. Warm handshakes, compliments about Putin's strength, the same admiration he's shown for authoritarian leaders before. When respect creeps into diplomacy, power shifts, and not always in the direction you'd expect. But here's what makes this fascinating. The real impact wasn't what happened in that room. It was what happened after everyone left. See, when superpowers fail to resolve their differences, the pressure doesn't just disappear, it flows somewhere else. Like water finding a new path when the main river gets blocked. And where did all that pressure flow? Straight toward countries that refuse to pick sides. Countries like India. Now let me explain why this matters for India. When Trump's team realized they couldn't move Putin, they started looking for other ways to squeeze Russia, other pressure points, other leverage, and India, without meaning to, had become Russia's economic lifeline. Think about the numbers. India buys more Russian oil than almost any other country. Not because they love Russia, but because it makes economic sense. Cheaper oil means lower costs for Indian businesses, stable fuel prices for Indian families, billions saved that can be invested in growth instead of energy bills. Smart business, right? But from Washington's perspective, every barrel India buys keeps Russian money flowing, weakens Western sanctions, gives Putin the cash he needs to keep fighting. Then there's defense. India's military runs on Russian equipment, fighter jets, submarines, missile systems, the famous S-400 air defense system that America's been complaining about for years. 60 to 70% of India's military hardware has Russian DNA in it. You can't just switch suppliers overnight. It would be like asking someone to replace their entire nervous system. Dangerous, expensive, practically impossible. But Washington sees it differently. They see a country that could cut Russia's lifelines if it really wanted to. A country that chooses economic benefits over geopolitical pressure. A country that acts independently instead of following American lead. And that independence, that's what triggered the warning. Shortly after Alaska, Trump's team floated an idea, a threat, really. If Russia won't bend, maybe it's time to pressure Russia's friends, starting with India. We're talking about sanctions that could hit 50% of India's economic connections with America. 50%. Let that sink in. Not because India invaded anyone, not because India broke international law, but because India refused to abandon relationships that serve its national interests. Now, why would America even consider this? Simple. Leverage works both ways. America knows that India's economy depends on several key relationships: technology partnerships with Silicon Valley, service exports worth over $150 billion annually, investment flows that keep Indian markets stable, defense cooperation that helps balance China's rise. Cut those connections and India feels immediate pain. Stock markets drop, currency weakens, inflation rises, economic growth slows. The theory is simple. Make independence expensive enough, and countries will choose alignment instead. But here's what Washington might be missing. This isn't the 1990s anymore. India isn't the same country that had to pledge gold reserves just to pay for basic imports. Today's India has options, real options. Let me break down what sanctions would actually mean. First, the immediate economic hit. Indian IT companies employ millions of people. They power American banks, hospitals, airlines, and government systems. TCS, Infosys, Wipro aren't just service providers. They're the backbone of America's digital infrastructure. Cut that connection and both sides suffer. India loses jobs and revenue. America loses efficiency and innovation. It's like trying to remove the foundation while the building is still standing. Messy, expensive, dangerous for everyone. Then there's the defense issue. Remember, most of India's military equipment comes from Russia. Sanctions that block spare parts, upgrades, or maintenance would create immediate security risks, and India faces real threats. Pakistan on one side, China on the other, both watching for signs of weakness. Military readiness isn't optional when you have hostile neighbors with nuclear weapons, but the deeper impact would be psychological. Sanctioning India sends a message to 1.4 billion people. It says independence comes at a cost. Choose American interests over Indian interests or face economic punishment. That's not alliance building, that's coercion. And here's what makes this dangerous for America. India isn't just another country anymore. It's the world's fifth largest economy, the fastest growing major market, the demographic center of global growth for the next 3 decades. Sanctioning India wouldn't just hurt India. It would hurt American companies that depend on Indian talent, American consumers who benefit from Indian innovation, American strategic interests that need Indian partnership to balance China. So what would India actually do if sanctions came? Let's look at the options. Option 1 is compliance. India could bend to American pressure, scale back Russian oil purchases, delay defense deals, align more closely with Western positions on Ukraine. The benefit? Avoid economic pain. Keep access to American markets and technology. Maintain the strategic partnership that helps counter China. The cost? Sovereignty. Because once you bend to pressure, you set a precedent. Tomorrow it might not be about Russia. Tomorrow it could be about China or Iran or any relationship that America disapproves of. For a country that built its modern identity on strategic autonomy, that's a steep price. Option 2 is defiance. India could double down on independence, increase Russian oil imports, deepen defense cooperation, signal to Washington that India doesn't take orders from anyone. The benefit? Credibility, showing the world that India can't be bullied, strengthening relationships with countries that respect Indian sovereignty. The cost? Economic damage that could slow growth, hurt the middle class, and undermine development goals, plus the risk of pushing America toward deeper partnership with Pakistan or other regional rivals. Option 3 is the balancing act. The path India has mastered over decades. What would this look like? Quietly reducing the visibility of Russian oil imports without cutting them completely. Diversifying energy sources to include more Middle Eastern, African, and American suppliers. Expanding trade relationships across Europe, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. In defense, accelerating domestic production under Make in India programs. Gradually reducing dependency without abandoning strategic relationships. Building indigenous capability that makes foreign pressure less effective. And diplomatically, positioning India as the mediator, the country that talks to everyone when others can't, the bridge between competing power blocks. This third option is most likely. Why? Because it preserves independence while avoiding direct confrontation. It turns pressure into opportunity by forcing India to become more self-reliant and globally connected at the same time. But here's the key insight. Whichever path India chooses, it won't be choosing from weakness. For the first time in centuries, India has real leverage, economic leverage because the world needs Indian markets and talent, strategic leverage because no Indo-Pacific balance works without India, demographic leverage because India represents the future of global growth. That's what the Alaska meeting revealed, not just that America couldn't force Russia to bend, but that America might not be able to force anyone to bend anymore, at least not without paying a serious price. Let me show you what I mean. 30 years ago, India was economically fragile, dependent on foreign aid, technologically backward, militarily weak. When the Gulf War sent oil prices soaring, India almost went bankrupt, had to borrow against gold reserves just to import basic necessities. That India could be sanctioned easily, forced into compliance, made to choose sides. Today's India is completely different, fifth largest economy in the world, projected to be third largest within a decade, leading in digital payments, space technology, pharmaceutical production. Home to some of the world's most valuable companies and innovative entrepreneurs. This India has options. Sanctions from America. India increases trade with Europe, Africa, and Asia. Blocked from Western technology. India accelerates domestic innovation. Cut off from dollar-based systems. India expands alternative payment mechanisms through partnerships with Russia, China, and other emerging economies. Every door America closes, India can open two others. And that's exactly what makes India powerful in this new world order. Think about America's own needs. The entire Indo-Pacific strategy depends on Indian partnership. Without India, there's no credible balance against China, no Quad alliance, no democratic counterweight in Asia. American Logi companies need Indian engineers. American hospitals need Indian doctors. American universities need Indian students. American consumers benefit from Indian innovation in everything from generic drugs to software solutions. Sanctioning India doesn't just hurt India. It weakens America's own strategic position. That's the paradox Washington faces. The more pressure they apply, the more they risk pushing India toward the very countries they're trying to isolate. Russia, China, Iran, countries that would welcome closer ties with the world's fastest growing major economy. Now let's zoom out to the bigger picture. What we're witnessing isn't just about oil or defense or sanctions. It's about the emergence of a multipolar world, a world where no single country can dictate terms to everyone else. For 70 years, global politics worked on a simple principle. America sets the rules, allies follow them, enemies get isolated or punished. That system is breaking down, not because America is weak, but because other countries are strong enough to chart their own paths. India is the perfect example, big enough to resist pressure, connected enough to have alternatives, confident enough to prioritize its own interests over external demands. And the Alaska meeting made this crystal clear. When America couldn't get what it wanted from Russia, the natural response was to look for other pressure points, other ways to achieve the same goal. But what if those pressure points have their own power, their own interests, their own ability to push back? That's the new reality. Countries like India aren't satellites anymore. They're independent poles in a multipolar system. And sanctions? Sanctions are a tool from the old world. They work when you're dealing with small, isolated, dependent countries. They become dangerous when you use them against countries that have other options. Because here's what happens when you sanction a rising power. You don't weaken them, you force them to become more self-reliant, more innovative, more connected to alternative networks. Look at Russia after 2014. Sanctions forced them to develop domestic capabilities they never had before, strengthened ties with China, India, and other non-Western countries, created alternative financial systems that reduced dependence on Western institutions. Did sanctions stop Russia? No. They made Russia more independent. The same thing could happen with India. Sanctions might cause short-term pain, but they'd also accelerate India. as journey towards strategic autonomy, force faster development of domestic industries, push deeper integration with non-Western economies. In 5 years, India could emerge stronger, more self-reliant, and less dependent on American approval. Is that really what Washington wants? Here's what I think is really happening. The Alaska meeting wasn't just about Ukraine. It was a test of American influence in the New World Order. Can America still force other countries to follow its lead? Can pressure still work the way it used to? The answer, based on what we saw, is no, at least not with countries that have real options. Russia didn't bend. If anything, Putin looked more confident after the meeting than before. He proved that Russia could resist American pressure even when it comes from the very top. And now, by threatening India, America risks proving the same point again, that pressure campaigns against strong, independent countries often backfire. Because here's the thing about India. Every crisis has made it stronger. The 1962 war with China led to military modernization. The 1991 economic crisis led to liberalization and growth. The 2008 financial crisis led to deeper domestic markets. If sanctions come, they'll just be the next crisis that forces India to innovate, adapt, and emerge stronger. That's not weakness. That's resilience. And resilience in the 21st century is the ultimate form of power. So, what's the real lesson from Alaska? It's not about who won or lost in that meeting room. It's about what the meeting revealed about how power works in today's world. Old power was about domination, making other countries do what you want through threats and pressure. New power is about options, having enough alternatives that no one else can control your choices. India has those options now. Economic options through diversified trade relationships, strategic options through multiple partnerships, technological options through domestic innovation. That's why India emerged as the real winner from Alaska, not because they were at the meeting, but because they didn't need to be there. They're strong enough to chart their own course, connected enough to have alternatives, confident enough to resist pressure. And that independence, that's not just good for India, it's good for the world. Because a multipolar world with multiple centers of power is more stable than a unipolar world where one country tries to control everything. It's more innovative because different countries can try different approaches. It's more resilient because no single point of failure can bring down the entire system. The Alaska meeting marked the end of the old world order. A world where superpowers could meet and decide everyone else's fate. The new world order is emerging, and in this new world, countries like India don't just react to what others decide. They shape the decisions themselves. That's real power. That's lasting power. That's the power to build your own future instead of accepting someone else's vision for it. And that's why long after the Alaska meeting is forgotten, we'll remember it as the moment India stepped into its role as a true global power. Not because anyone gave them permission, but because they no longer needed permission to be themselves.